Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. Our favorite day of the week is here. And we're very pleased to have a special guest today, Miss Beth Kurland. I should probably say Dr. Beth Kurland, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Beth is fine. Or anything thereafter. Yeah.
Well, Beth is a PhD clinical psychologist. She's an award-winning author. We're going to be talking a little bit about her newest book that just came out in March, and getting to know a little bit about really how she's helping her clients and helping others to find more well-being. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between striving for happiness and finding true well-being, which I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that, Beth. That's very interesting, but it sounds intriguing. So thanks for being here on Finding Certainty today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. You know, we were talking before the show about how many searches there are and how many appearances in media just for the word certainty. And then if you add the word uncertainty, just put that little UN on the front, the searches and the media appearances just in a 24-hour period go up 10x, 20x. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And there's so much uncertainty out there, so much chaos and so much fear and worry and anxiety and so forth. I think this show is resonating with people because of that fact and because people have questions. They're looking for solutions, right? One of the main reasons I invited Beth to be on our show today was she has some solutions. She's figured out some things through her career and in working with her clients and so forth that seem to be helping. So I always start the show out with two reasons why I've invited this specific guest to be with us. This is one of them. Beth has some answers and some insights that we thought could be of benefit to you if you ever are feeling those feelings, that anxiety or that worry, maybe a little uncertainty in your life, which we all do at times. You're not unique. Don't feel like you're alone if that's the case. But I thought that would be an interesting topic here for finding certainty, to unpack the layers a little bit and see what Beth could share with us. The second reason is she has taken her books that she's created, that she's written, and the last one, she put it into a program called the Wellbeing Toolkit. It's an online program. I thought we might talk a little bit about that as well, but I definitely want to get into the nuts and bolts of your newest book. Let me make sure I have the title here right. It says, "You Don't Have to Change Everything. 6 Ways to Shift Your Vantage Point, Stop Striving for Happy, and Find True Well-Being." That's a mouthful.
Yes.
But it sounds interesting, right? So why don't we jump in and just let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us where you're from and maybe where you grew up, and how did you end up deciding to go into psychology?
Yeah, so where to start? Back at the very beginning, I was born in Michigan, so I spent the first 5 years of my life in the Midwest. And then
Ann Arbor, right?
Yeah. Then moved to Wichita, Kansas for a year. And that was an interesting experience, as I could talk about some memories there, tornado drills and that kind of thing. So when I was in first grade, that was my, that was my experience living in Kansas for a year. But then we moved to Connecticut, and that's really where I grew up, spent most of my school years at that point, and then in college ended up in Massachusetts, and have been in Massachusetts ever since that. So I consider myself a New Englander. at this
It's in
point.
your blood now, right?
Yeah,
You've been through enough cold winters and
yeah, I love
so
it
forth.
here.
You've earned the right to call yourself a New Englander.
Yes, I really do love it. But, I think in terms of my journey, I think about a couple of little touch points. When I was really young, probably starting around 6 years old, because I started writing, and mostly at that time writing poetry. But I really loved writing and creative writing, and that stayed with me throughout my school years. And I thought for a very long time that, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I thought I wanted to be an author. That was what I would say. And then when I got into 11th grade, I took a social psychology class that was offered in high school. It was an elective. And I loved the class. And one of the things that we got to do in that class was to pair up. I was a mentor for a younger student who was in middle school, and we would meet. I would meet with that student once a week and just really be a supportive person for them. But there was something about that really spoke to me. And I don't know, it's just, I guess, people have different experiences, but for me, it was kind of like, okay, this is my calling. I feel like psychology is something I really want to do. And so that became really a pretty straight shot for me. Majored in psychology in college, and then, went on right from there. And I guess alongside of that is just then my own personal journey. I've always been drawn to mind-body practices, meditation, mindfulness, things like that. I've had some wonderful therapists in my own life and have learned so much from my own experience, and dealt with some significant loss when I was younger. My mom died when I was a teenager. So that, I feel like, is an important piece of my story or my journey in terms of, moving through that loss and working with grief. And then I just, kind of have launched into this career as a psychologist, which has taken different iterations, but I absolutely love what I do. It's really
That's
fun.
really neat.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think you can help but being changed and impacted when you go through a loss like that, especially as a younger person. I have, my parents are still with me, fortunately, but I have friends who lost their parents when they were young, or lost a sibling when they were young. And it stays with you, right? There's such a part of who you are, and suddenly you have that lack in your life, that gap. And even if you have faith, even if you believe you'll see them again, even if you have that assurance, you still feel their loss, right? And in many respects, I think we spend our whole life looking for ways to fill that void and to come to grips with it, right? To have closure. Would you agree, as the expert? Would you agree?
Yeah, and just from my own personal experience, and I was very struck by the title of your show, right? This finding certainty, especially in the context of, like you said, there's so much uncertainty around us. And for me, I think that was such a core piece, was and is this core piece that I experienced, like, a lot of uncertainty at a really fairly early point in my life, of my world being upended.
Sure.
And so it really has been this journey, I think, of how do we find some certainty, some stable ground, some well-being amidst these ups and downs of our life, and even just of our daily life, that I think we all experience quite a bit of ups and downs. So, as part of being human.
We do. I mean, one of the principles I learned years ago that has really stayed with me is, so often we feel like we're the only one going through something, right? We're dealing with something no one else is dealing with, and we feel very alone and very kind of maybe even targeted, or singled out, or we shake our fists at the heavens, oh, why do this to me? And yet the comment I heard was, if you look at the person next to you and assume they are going through something very difficult, you're going to be right more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand that, and if you believe it and start to kind of wrap your head around that, maybe start putting yourself into other people's shoes, starting to feel more empathy for each other as we should, it changes your perspective, right? One, you can handle it better. And two, you can help support each other more. You talk about mindset and mindfulness. I think just being mindful of the fact we're in this together, we're all going through hard things. We're not alone. I think it's one of the key principles to finding well-being versus just happiness. There's that constant pursuit for happiness, which I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. But
yeah, I love that, and there's a lot in there. I think that I feel like I've had such a privilege in this profession and kind of an unusual situation of sitting with so many hundreds of people over 30 plus years now, and really getting a chance to see up close and personal, like, the human journey, the human experience of so many different people. And I think you're absolutely right that, everybody, I mean, even the people who on the surface, you might think, oh, they have it all put together, they have it all figured out, everything's great. I think everybody struggles with whatever that is, our own personal and collective journeys. But so I like what you said about almost kind of assuming that, everybody's got something under there that they're dealing with. And this idea that we're not alone, I think that's so huge. That's, I hope that I am able, and certainly my intention, to try to impart that to my patients, this idea that what you're going through, you're not alone. This is part of being human. And there are so many other people who, you may not realize, but are experiencing similar things. And one of my whole chapters in my book actually speaks to this idea of that, of this, that we are not alone, that we're part of this interconnected whole. And when we can realize that and feel that and experience that, it offers us some level, I think, of support as we go through whatever we're dealing with.
Well, it does. And I believe that it's more than just mindset, right? Or perspective. It can actually be a catalyst to realizing I'm not alone, but I don't have to be alone. I can reach out to others. I can turn to people for help. I don't need to be embarrassed or afraid or shamed or whatever the case might be. So often, we struggle with the emotional intelligence of being transparent, right? Of being real with people. We live in this social media lives, the Facebook life, where we put on our best face. And people know it's BS, right? They know it's not true, or at least they hope it is. they think I can't be the only one who's having problems. And I think if we all realize that we're not, and we're not alone, whether we're going through something hard, or maybe life is good for us right now, things are going well, and we realize someone else the person next to us is probably going through something hard. I think if we have that mindset, we can get through things more, but we can also lift each other up. And collectively, a rising tide raises all ships, as they say, right? And if we can support each other, I mean, they say that if you're having a bad day, the best thing you can do is go out and serve someone else, right? If you're struggling, we see people who are sick and they have chronic pain. I mean, my wife is a great example of this. She deals with chronic pain and chronic fatigue, and yet she's so quick to serve others, and it helps her feel better. It helps invigorate her when she doesn't feel like doing anything, right? And so I think there's a lot of depth in that. And we're all going through the mortal experience together. And if we stop and realize that, let's look outward more than in, maybe we can get through it more easily.
Yeah, I think we all need to. I feel like the world, let's say, needs more of that perspective and reminders. And the last chapter of my book, I titled it "The Ocean View," and And I think because we can go through life sometimes thinking like we're the isolated wave and not realizing that that wave is actually part of this whole interconnected ocean of which we are all a part, each wave kind of makes up that vast, spacious ocean, and it's all interconnected by the same water.
100%.
Yeah. So everything you're saying just resonates so deeply with what I think, is so foundational and important to remember and for our well-being. And
Well, you look at your life, and any of us, right? Our upbringings, our losses, our triumphs, our education. I mean, I know you went to college. You said at Amherst for your undergrad, and then Clark for your PhD.
Yeah.
And we go through college, right? And we learn all these things and gain all these insights and experiences. But then we start out into our career, and a lot of the time it takes us a little while to figure out our path and figure out where we really belong, where we're going to find the most joy. And some of us it takes longer than others. But isn't it true, Beth, and wouldn't you agree that when you launched or embarked on your journey of serving others as a clinical psychologist, and you started just pouring yourself into that service, isn't that where your life took on real meaning? I mean, and I ask you, I say that because I say this, because of this. For so long we're focused on our jobs, our school, our upbringing, our sports, et cetera, et cetera. But when we figure out at some point in our life when we can start to serve others, that I believe is where our lives become rich and become full. However that is, whether it's through your church, your work, your school, your parent, as a parent to kids, whatever it is, that is where our life takes on multiple shades of color rather than maybe being a little black and white.
Yeah, I love that. I will. I think we may be coming up to a break, but I have a thought I want to share maybe after that, just segueing with what you're saying, because again, that really resonates very deeply with me. And I think it's a wonderful message.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll be right back. We're visiting with Beth Kurland. She's a clinical psychologist. She's written 4 books, award-winning books. We're going to talk a little bit about her latest one, who's also it's also been done as an audio book. You did the voice, right, Beth?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of fun.
What's an experience?
Intense experience.
So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're on Finding Certainty. Don't go away. I think you're going to learn some really interesting insights from Beth here today. So we'll be right back.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. We're having a lively conversation with Beth Kurland. She's coming to us from out in the Boston area, New England, with those cold winters and gorgeous falls. And, you know, a funny insight, Beth, is I've been to New England several times. I've been to Stowe, Vermont in the winter. I was an interpreter with the Army. I interpreted for World Ski Championships there one year.
Uh-huh.
I've been there in the summer. I've been there in the spring, but I've never been there in the fall, which is when everybody wants to go there. So it's on my bucket list. I keep missing it. I've even had trips planned that fell through. So I'll get there eventually. But
It's
anyway.
beautiful. I love the changing seasons here. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I've seen pictures, obviously, but it's gorgeous. I was saying my daughter, Madeline, went to Wellesley College, and even then, I wasn't able to see it during the fall. It just was never there at the right time of year. So I'll get there. But prior to the break, we were talking a little bit. I know you had an idea or a thought you wanted to share. So I'll just segue to you and go for it.
Yeah. So you were just talking about this idea of service and, this giving to others. And there's something that really struck me when I was trying to think. I was in high school, I know, and I had heard a talk that, and what was quoted in that talk was it was actually a quote by William James, who I didn't realize at the time, but anyway, is considered, one of the fathers of psychology. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't know if I'm getting it exactly right, but that something to the extent that he said, the greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it.
I like
that really struck with me. And I don't know, I just remember, at that age, like, whoa, something really hit me with that. And this idea of, how can we find some kind of meaning and purpose in our lives, whatever it might be. And it can look so different for different people. I think there's so many different ways of, but finding some way of, what can we share? What gifts can we share with the world or put out there that are beyond us, that are beyond just our, that will outlast us, or that will, in some way, shape, or form. And that just kind of made me think of what you had been saying about this idea of service. And I think when we can connect in with that kind of meaning and purpose, and again, it can look very different for different people. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be, just taking care, and being a good neighbor. I mean, it can be as simple as that. But I think when we can touch into that, it really, it really helps with these uncertainties of life and the ups and downs that we deal with, and knowing that we can connect back in with that deeper sense of connection with others that can uplift us.
I really resonate with that. I mean, we've all heard you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul to the cemetery, right? We can't take it with us. The only thing we really leave behind is our relationships and our impact, our legacy. I remember a book I read years ago called Man's Search for Meaning. It was by Viktor Frankl.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you know him. He was a Holocaust victim, Jewish Holocaust victim in the camps. And he said, the only thing that can be taken from us is our ability to choose our response in any situation.
Uh-huh.
He talks about, so they all remember people who would go through the camps and lift other people up and give away their last piece of bread and so forth. And you think they don't have as much nourishment because they're doing that, but they're the ones who survived, right? They're the ones who made it through more often than not. And I've always remembered that lesson. So we could go on and on this topic, but let's talk about your book, right? You talk about not striving for happiness, instead true well-being. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit for us and tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah. So first of all, I always kind of put out this disclaimer that I think happiness is a wonderful thing, and I wish it for all of us as much as possible.
Sure.
But I also think that at least where I grew up, so I speak from my own personal experience in this part of the country that I'm in, and I know that maybe certainly different for people, different places in the world, but that there is this almost holy grail of happiness that that we can get caught into striving for, or feeling like we need to be happy all the time, and especially, and I think this is where the book really grew out of, this sense of something's wrong if I'm not feeling happy all the time. What's wrong with me when I'm feeling these other more unpleasant or difficult emotions? And
more common emotions, more frequent emotions.
Yeah. And so, again, happiness, the other thing about happiness is that it tends to be, at least as I'm defining kind of hedonic happiness, this search for pleasure, right? This, as I feel like our American culture tends to maybe define it by, that it tends to be dependent on circumstances. When X happens, when Y happens, then I feel happy. Or also dependent on mood. I need to be in a certain mood that I label as happiness. So what do we do the other 50% of the time, or 25% of the time, or 70% of the time when we're not feeling that?
80%.
Yeah, whatever that is. And I've had so many people come into my office over the years going through grief, going through challenges, having lost a job, having, lost, breakup of a relationship, or kind of come in and say, what's wrong with me that I'm feeling this way? That, that I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be stronger. I should be like that kind of thing. And so I think there's a judgment, at least as I've seen it, when we feel some of these more difficult emotions. And so I think instead of striving for happiness, what I've come to find over these years and in my own personal journey is to think more about cultivating well-being. That I see well-being as an innate capacity that we all have as human beings, but it's something that can be hard to access in the day-to-day stressors that we all experience. And it's not something that we typically learn how to do either. And so, but I think of well-being kind of like, if you imagine a deep well that you can continually draw from, that you can draw nourishment from, and that it's there for you even in the midst of difficulties. Even if you might be feeling, that well-being can be present even in the midst of sadness, or even if there's grief there, or, frustration or other kinds of emotions, that we can still find our way to experience some well-being within all of that. And I think that is really what I talk about in the book.
I love that. One of my favorite quotes was from the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ, Joseph Smith. He talked about, I am wont to walk in deep waters. Says, he went through a lot of trials, was eventually martyred for his faith, but he said he longed to be in deep waters. And what he was saying was, I've taken that and I've thought about that quote a lot, because I think the deeper you are, the deeper the water, the quieter it is, right? Mm-hmm. The the less you talk about how waves are all connected as part of the ocean, but where deep water, sometimes it's frightening for people because it's the unknown, right? I think there's also something to be said about having depth in your personality, depth in your responses. So often we think that we have to be upbeat and perky and happy, and that's the definition of happiness, right? High energy and outgoing, and maybe that's not your cup of tea, right? It's funny because I consider myself an antisocial people person. I've been in sales for 40 years. I'm a radio host. I'm a public speaker. I enjoy public speaking, enjoy those interactions, but I just as soon be all by myself on a river fly fishing, right? Mm-hmm. Or in my office with the door closed working on projects. I think that's where I'm really happy, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but I guess what I'm getting at is whoever we are is okay. Right. And we don't have to fit into a mold or a cookie cutter, outline or a preconceived notion. One, happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes. We have good and bad days. We have experiences of joy and experiences of loss. And I think one of the most important things we can do is learn to roll with the punches and have, I always say, water off a duck's back, whether it's you're thinking of the deeper I am, the more I can handle these things, but also the more flexible we are, and the more I think more malleable and more resilient. And I'd rather be a piece of rubber than a piece of stone, because I'm going to handle things much better. And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think coming back to the title of your show, that in terms of finding certainty, especially again in an uncertain world with changing emotions, with all this stuff, I guess what I've come to see is that there are some things that we can be certain of. And it has to do with, and again, this sort of going back into the themes of my book, this idea that we can't always change the external circumstances. Sometimes we can, and great, but what we can always do is we can shift our vantage point. We can shift where we're looking from. And when we do that, what we see changes, the landscape changes, the viewpoint changes. And in fact, each of the 6 shifts of vantage point that I talk about, from my experience of working with people in my own life, that when we learn to shift our vantage point in these 6 ways, it helps us deepen that well of well-being, so that, there's, what can we be certain of that, and in the research, there's a lot of research that supports different ways that well-being actually can be thought of in some ways as a skill that we can build, that we could grow on as well. So that when we, work with some of these principles and tools and things like that, there is a little bit more stable ground that we can find underneath ourselves, or that deep still waters like you talked about. I love that image as well. Yeah.
Well, your books, I'm sure they're different in their own ways, but they have this theme. The first one was dancing on the tightrope.
Uh-huh.
I have all this imagery of life is chaos and it's challenging, and yet you talk about the dance, right? You talk about finding joy in the process, and you talk about the transformative power of 10 minutes and gifts of the rain puddle. I mean, these titles are really intriguing to me. Gifts of the rain puddle. That sounds. We could unpack that. We could do a whole series, a whole episode just on that topic. I think, there's something to be said about whatever we're going through, finding the gifts within it, right? The lessons. I always talk about how we have 3 kinds of sight in our lives. We have foresight, midsight, and hindsight. And we all have 20/20 hindsight. We can look back on experiences and see what we learned and what we gained from it, and good or bad. We have foresight. We can prepare for things and plan for things. But the challenging one is midsight. As we're going through experiences, to stop and pause and maybe step back a little bit and ask for help or ask for input or stop and say, what can I gain from this difficult experience I'm going through? Or this great experience, this joyful experience. And how can I make the most of it? You talk about New England. One of my favorite movies is The Dead Poets Society, or with Robin Williams at Harvard, and he talks about sucking the marrow out of life, which in my mind means, don't waste it. Don't waste a moment. Do everything you can to enjoy and to thrive and to not just survive, but thrive in the experience, right?
Yeah. I think that idea of shifting from surviving to thriving is one of the underlying themes of my book as well. This idea that we have these mental habits and this automatic pilot that we can go through life from, and not being able, when we're in our autopilot, we don't always see these mental habits and how they can create some suffering for us in different ways. And we don't realize that we're caught in those mental habits. And so when we can step back and be able to take a more mindful view and really notice things from these different perspectives, it gives us more choice. It gives us an ability to step out of some of these habitual, maybe automatic ways of being that we go through life in survival mode. And it can open the door to more thriving.
Well, we have to, I think, make the conscious effort to create pattern interrupts, right? To step back and slow down. They say that there's this space between stimulus and response, right?
Yes.
Or stimulus and reaction. And the longer that space, usually the better the reaction or the better the response. But I have a question for you when we come back. We're up against our next break here.
Okay.
But I'd love to have you share with the listening audience the 6 ways that you change your vantage point.
Yes, I'd love to share that.
That's from your book, I know, but it's, I think this is great stuff. And, these principles and these insights we're discussing can in fact work. They can in fact create more certainty in our lives if we will just learn them and implement them. Then we have to practice and get better at them. But they absolutely work. I mean, that's the thing. I've seen it too many times in too many different scenarios and too many different lives to ever question their validity. And I know you would concur with that. But
so I'll look forward to sharing some of the 6 ways.
All right, we will come right back. Don't go away. You're going to miss out on the best part. Some of the secrets from Beth's book. So we'll be right back.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. If you're still with us, we're grateful. If this is the first time you've stumbled across our show, I hope you're enjoying it. Every week we have a similar type of conversation with another expert like Beth Kurland, who we're visiting with today. And we're unpeeling or peeling back the layers of this artichoke that we call certainty. One of the most important principles, and I hear this repeatedly from multiple experts and multiple entrepreneurs and others that are just phenomenal examples of this. They consistently talk about mindset and perspective and vantage point. And so I know this is a big part of your book, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
You mind sharing with us those 6 vantage points, if you can do so?
Yeah, so there's, a lot in each one, but I'll try to just scratch the surface,
Sure.
give people a little insight. So each of these 6 vantage points is really a way of relating to you talked about the foresight, what did you call it? Mid-sight.
Insight, yeah.
Mid-sight. So it's kind of like working with that mid-sight. How do we relate to our experience? How do we relate to our inner emotions as they arise? And often, I think by human nature, especially when we come up against more inner turbulence, if you will, we tend to either avoid, push away, suppress, try to get rid of, or feel like, what's wrong? I'm feeling this way. Or we can swing to the other end and we get swallowed up in, we get kind of overtaken sometimes by the intensity of what we're experiencing. So the first and most fundamental shift of vantage point is how we can, and going back to the deep still waters, how can we grab an anchor in the middle of a storm? And I call it the anchor view. And, this idea that when the waters of our life are turbulent, when there's big storms at the surface, if we do go down deep enough below the surface, we grab that anchor and follow that anchor down below the water enough, there is stillness down there. Yes. And what I'm really referring to here, and I get into this quite a bit in the book, is understanding our autonomic nervous system and how it works. I think about it like kind of knowing the workings under the hood of the car, because if we can understand how our nervous system works, it actually there's a lot of certainty and predictability about the ways that our nervous system responds to perceived threats in our day-to-day stressors in our environment, and ways that we can calm and settle our nervous system. And so I share a lot of strategies for being able to really stabilize and ground and settle our nervous system in the middle of, when we experience some of these more turbulent emotions. And in doing that, it really opens up it gives us a portal into this newer operating system. So our old operating system is a lot about fight or flight. Through evolution, we've evolved to kind of have this stress response that puts us in a, protective mode when we're faced with challenges, that we can get anxious, we can get angry, we can get irritable. But this is all really a throwback from our ancestors trying to either fight the tiger or to run away. Right. And when we can learn to bring some more stable balance, that you talked about B for balance, right? Balanced energy into our bodies and into our nervous system, we gain access to our higher cortex, our higher thinking brain. We gain access to compassion and self-compassion. We gain access to creativity, to being able to have a bigger perspective, to problem solve. So this applies to, I guess, to anybody, but, business people, entrepreneurs, or when we can find a way of helping to regulate our at the nervous system level first, then we can really begin to again access this whole rich treasure chest of resources within us. So that's the anchor view. And there's a lot of body practices that I share in the book that are very hands-on things. And there's actually accompanying audio meditations and things that go along with the book that people can actually really dive into.
Wow. I think of it a little bit like the conscious versus the subconscious. So much of what we do is automatic. It's automatic response. And yet if we can realize and think through more of what we do, what we say, how we're responding, step back from it, like I always say, I think we can accomplish some significant things. It's incorporating and I guess engaging that other side of our brain, right?
Yeah. And that's actually what you just said is a perfect segue into the second and third vantage points that I call the child view, and the audience view. So the child view is all about stepping out of our automatic pilot mode. Because when we're in automatic pilot, we're just rushing through a day. We don't see these things that are arising. We don't notice the patterns that we're stuck in. So the child view, if you look at, if you watch small babies, there's this innate curiosity that we have as human beings. And so if we can learn to bring this kind of curiosity to the goings of our day and our inner thoughts and catching, say for myself, for example, I'm very driven, and in many ways that's helped me be successful, but it also can tip into too much. Like I can be going through my day, oh my God, it's 11 o'clock. I haven't gotten anything accomplished today. I got to do more. I'm not doing enough. And I can get tense and I can get, just go through my day like that. And if I'm not noticing or paying attention, then I'm stuck in that mode. But if I can bring curiosity to this child view, isn't that interesting that here I am, gripping the steering wheel this tight, and there's actually nothing, there's no lions chasing me right now. I can, can I soften? Can I relax? Can I go through my day with a little more ease, right? If I can notice that, it gives me that choice that you talked about.
It's stopping and realizing there is no saber-toothed tiger, right?
Yeah.
You're not, the problem is that our body, our mind, our brain doesn't know the difference between real and make-believe, perceived and actual. It doesn't know the difference between present and past. It doesn't calculate the difference. It's all present to our brain.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to remind it of these things.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, yeah, absolutely. And, even I'm thinking back, the beginning of our conversation here, but during the pandemic, that was such a time of uncertainty, especially in those early points. I tried to be aware and I would catch myself, but I think so many of us dealt with a lot of anxiety, understandably, of course, as human beings. But my being able to catch myself and recognize in any given moment, me walking around in this heightened state of anxiety, which, by the way, I'm wired kind of anxious, was not actually keeping me safer in the moment. And when I could see that, it was a helpful reminder to, bring some other tools in to help me, cultivate well-being in the midst of my day. But I think that the audience view, which is that third shift of vantage point, also touches on something you said. It's about that stepping back. It's about being able to it's the difference between being the actor on stage caught in the drama and sitting in the audience watching what's unfolding. Because when we're in the audience watching, when we can relocate ourselves from that place, we're able to, there's more space between what's actually, what's happening and the observing self, that awareness that's able to notice. And from that place, we can really notice the ways that sometimes these mental habits can really grip us. We create stories. We create a lot of narratives about everything that happens in our life. There might be a breakup of a relationship. What's wrong with me? I'm defective in some way, or maybe, a loss of a job, people, who might go to the place in the mind, I'm a failure in some way, right? These mental habits can really keep us stuck. And when we can take that half step back and notice, I notice my mind is creating this story. And then that, from that space of noticing, we recognize maybe that, this is not actual truth. It creates a little more space to be able to bring something else alongside there. So when we can take that audience view, it allows us to, again, see what's unfolding in the moment, but recognize what's serving our well-being and maybe what's a throwback from, again, that saber-toothed tiger or this protective mechanisms that can jump in that may not be so accurate. There may be distortions there, especially the things we tell ourselves.
Well, because of how that part of our brain operates, it doesn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a late mortgage payment, right? They're two completely different things, but the brain thinks this is a crisis, this is anxiety, this is something I need to be either fight or flight and have that sort of response from. It's really interesting when you understand this, and you can step back and you can question your doubts. I heard a talk once that said, doubt your doubts, right? Talking about faith and so forth, but doubt your doubts. And all that's about is being mindful enough and having perspective and asking a little bit more questions. Maybe we talked about that space between stimulus and response, taking a little bit longer, not only to think about how we respond to things, but how we think of things.
Yeah.
Right. So, sorry, as we're approaching the end of the show, and I want you to at least drop a hint of what the three other vantage points are before we run out of time. They're going to have to go find your book to find out what they are in detail. But maybe give them a hint, if you wouldn't mind, before we run out of time here.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk for another hour or two.
We could, yeah, for sure.
So after the audience view is the compassionate parent view, I call it. But this is all about developing a different relationship with our own inner distress. That often when we come up against these difficult emotions, we tell ourselves we shouldn't be feeling this way. We what's wrong with me? We try to push it away, ignore it, or we can kind of get swallowed up in it. But if you imagine the way that a compassionate parent might comfort a small child, putting their arm around that child and saying, I see you, I hear you, I see whatever you're struggling with, and I'm here with you. When we can learn to do that for ourselves, there's something really transformative that happens in that. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And even from a motivation perspective, being able to develop that self-compassion can be so powerful. And then the mirror view is all about finding our strengths. We usually look in the mirror, we see what's wrong, what's missing, what we need to fix. But this mirror view is all about looking in the mirror and seeing what's working, what's already here that we're doing well, and how to do more of it. That change comes about not by trying to fix what's wrong, but by finding what's right and strengthening it. And so that's really the mirror view. And the ocean view is really touching back to what we had talked about in terms of how can we find meaning and purpose and a sense of connection and interconnection with something outside of us that can really help bring ease in the midst of, these human challenges that we all experience, so that we don't feel alone, so that we really feel a sense of interconnection with the world around us and with people around us.
That's fantastic. I don't do this very often, Beth, but I think I'd like to invite you to come back and do another episode where we can dig into these in a little more detail. And I would like to learn about your well-being toolkit and how that's evolved out of the last book, the Rain Puddle book. and then I know you're going to incorporate some of the principles in this new book into that same online class. And so let's talk more about this. Unfortunately, we're up against the end of the show. It always goes so fast. I know. And But I've really enjoyed having you on Finding Certainty. I think we should definitely get you back in as soon as possible and continue the conversation. How do people reach out to you or connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, so my website is, I have lots of resources there, and that is bethkurland.com, BETHKURLAND. And I'm on social media, Instagram and, LinkedIn and Facebook as well. But that is all through my website is probably the easiest way to find all those links. And
Well, I'm sure that listening audience, whoever they are, wherever they are in the world, have enjoyed this as much as I have. Your wealth of knowledge. I think your insights are spot on and invaluable. And so thanks for being here. I really appreciate you being on Finding Certainty today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. Absolutely love talking with you.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. And remember, certainty is out there. You can find it. We can help. And we wish you the very best. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.